Hey everybody, you may be wondering why you didn't hear the sweet podcast intro music that you're used to hearing, but that's actually because this is not really a Mad Scientist Financial Independence podcast episode. A couple of months ago, a guy named Joshua emailed me to ask if I'd be a guest on his podcast. I agreed, and we ended up having a 2+ hour conversation about a lot of really interesting financial topics. He then went on to publish the podcast a few weeks later, and I linked to it in the Outside the Lab post that I wrote. Well, due to some circumstances that Joshua isn't able to disclose, he's had to take down his podcast and his website. Since he doesn't know if or when he'll be able to put it back up, he was kind enough to allow me to publish our interview here. The original episode was nearly 2 hours long, but I decided to edit it down and split it into 2 parts. So this is the first of those 2 parts. Before I get into the interview, I just want to say thanks again to Joshua, though, and I really hope he's able to get his podcast up and running again soon, because the episodes that he did have were definitely really enjoyable to listen to. So here it is, the Radical Personal Finance Podcast with me, the Mad Scientist.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your financial journey. Where'd you start from? How long have you been interested in financial independence? Where you're at in your progress towards your goals? Kind of just give us a little bit of background so we can understand who you are and where you're coming from.
Sure, yeah. I'm 31 years old. I studied computer science in college, and I actually studied abroad in Glasgow, Scotland, when I was a junior. And when I was over there, I met a Scottish girl, and came back to the States for my senior year and graduated, and then I moved to Scotland. So we spent about 4 years living over there, and then I brought her over to the States, and then we just got married last year. So after 10 years of being together, we just got married.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, no, married life's been good. We just had our 1 year anniversary there just a little bit ago last month. So yeah, things are good with that. And yeah, as far as when did I start my journey to financial independence, I've always been quite frugal, and I've always loved looking into money. And like, even as a kid, like I couldn't wait till I had a portfolio to manage and have money to do things with and watch it grow. And so I've never been a big spender. So but the actual journey itself to financial independence, probably maybe 3 or 4 years ago, came across Early Retirement Extreme, which is, I just listened to your episode on his book review, which was excellent. So yeah, I came across his blog, and it was only then that I really thought, whoa, that's actually possible. Up until that point, like, not spending a lot of money, I would take off like 6 months at a time. In between jobs, I would quit. Obviously, moving between America and Scotland, that gave perfect opportunities just to go do fun things in between those times. So I always used my money for freedom in that sense, but it was never a focused goal to, okay, I'm going to just work really hard for this time and then I'll have freedom for the rest of my life. It was always like, work a bit, have a bit of freedom, work a bit, have a bit of freedom. So
It's really interesting how a lot of times there has to be some kind of catalytic event, like reading a story like Jacob's, or reading something, or hearing somebody, or talking to somebody, because by realizing how quickly it is possible. Jacob's story is excellent. He gives a very good, detailed kind of defense that it is possible, and you don't have to be some investment wizard to accomplish that goal. But by realizing what's possible, I believe that all of us can look at our specific goals and understand what's important to us with a much bigger realization of, I guess, the parameters that are possible. Not all of us are going to pursue Jacob's lifestyle. I'm probably not going to pursue your approach, but I learn from everyone's approach. So I think that that's one of the goals I have for this podcast, is to help people be exposed to stories and conversations with people who are doing it, and then seeing how they're doing it, so that we can start with our own goals and say, what do we want, and really feel confident about setting those plans. So it's neat that you came, that was a a transformative event in your life as far as his writings. I'm sure that would make him feel good.
Oh, absolutely. It completely changed everything. It was, and yeah, as you said, like I definitely don't plan on living this style of life that Jacob does, but I've, he's shown me what's possible as far as, just making choices that make you happy and rather than just doing what everybody else seems to be doing. So yeah, I could have, I'm sure I could have continued doing what I was doing and so far as, just working a few years and then going off and having a great time for a little while and then working a few more. But I definitely like the new plan of just working really hard and then having the rest of my life to do it as I wish.
So walk us through, and this is going to be a little bit personal, but since you wrote it and published it in public, I don't feel bad about asking you through it. Um, you sat down at some point over the last couple of years and really spent some time trying to envision and create your perfect life, as you put it. Walk us through kind of what that looks like for you, and I'm sure it'll change, so don't feel like you're lumped into a corner here. But walk us through the process of how you sat down first and started working on it, and then kind of what you think of with you and your wife, what feels like and looks like the perfect life for you guys.
Sure. Yeah. No. This was a really really good exercise, and I definitely encourage anyone to do it. And it's actually a lot harder than it sounds. Like you think you think you know what you want, but when you really sit down and try to picture, 3 months of something that's the same and doing the same thing, it's like the stuff you thought you wanted to be doing may not actually be the stuff you actually want to be doing. So it was definitely a really cool exercise, and yeah, it sort of came from. It was just a natural progression, I think. Once I knew that, okay, freedom's the number one thing. That's what I'm working towards. Just saving up the money, and then I'll have the freedom to do whatever I want. But then it's like, all right, well, what do I actually want to do? And if work factors into that, then why not account for that and start my perfect life sooner? And you know what I mean? So rather than think, all right, I just got to save up X amount of dollars so that I can spend Y amount every year. Well, if I'm going to be, working part-time doing something that I enjoy, I should probably try to factor that money in. So yeah, for a good few months, we just kept talking. My wife and I just, talking about different sorts of plans and what's really important to us. So, to sum up where we are right now, we realize that, like the things that make us happiest are being around people that we love and doing and trying new things that are challenging. So, since her family's in Scotland, my family's in America, we're never going to be able to live somewhere where both of us are completely happy as far as being able to see all the people that we want to see. So we thought, all right, well, let's think about this. We can spend, a few months here and there if we need to. We're going to have the flexibility to do that. So yeah, we came up with what we call the 363 plan, which means that we're going to spend 3 months in America, just traveling around, seeing my friends and family, and staying with them and spending some good quality time with them. We're going to go spend 6 months in Scotland to see my wife's family and our friends over there, and my wife will then work during that 6 months, which I'll come back to and talk about. And then we'll spend 3 months somewhere else in the world. We'll establish a base somewhere in a region that we want to explore, and then we'll, try to live like locals as much as we can, and just do little side trips outside of there, and maybe try to learn some languages and pick up new skills as when we're abroad. So that's where we stand right now, and that's we're actually planning for that first year of the 363 plan. So, but yeah, I'll come back to my wife working. I write about this in a couple posts actually, but the entire 10 plus years we've been together, we've had separate finances. I've obviously been pretty extreme in my savings rate ever since we met, and my wife hadn't been that extreme. She was quite a normal person before all these ideas started rubbing off on her. But so it always just worked best for us to have separate finances. because then that way we're both contributing equal amounts to the bills, but then I can go off and save the rest of mine, and she could, spend it or save it or whatever she wanted to do with it. So she's actually not going to be financially independent, which is why we are going to be living in Scotland for 6 months so she can work and see her family. And she enjoys her work a lot more than I think I do. So she's not too sad about it. I'm not too sad about it because I love spending time in Scotland.
What
And
type of field of work is she in?
she's an optometrist,
Okay.
so she'll be able to easily pick up. They're called locums in Scotland, which is, I guess, just like, if a practice needs an extra optometrist for a week or a day or a weekend or something, they can just call these people that don't have permanent jobs somewhere, and they can just come in and sub in for a week or whatever. So that works out quite well.
Yeah, that's really neat. And I want to riff off of that for a second
Hmm.
because did is she currently working a full-time practice where like it's her practice, or is she currently doing some sort of occasional employment?
She's working full time. It's not her practice, but she's working as an optometrist at someone else's practice. But yeah, she's full time, and she will be until we make our move abroad at the end of next year. So
Okay, so you mentioned for both you and for her in your article, you've mentioned that you are you're working towards being able to live off of your investment income, but you're also interested in building up sources of income that could allow you to not depend on your investment income so much. And I think, and also even in just what you said about your wife's potential income in the future of doing it part time, that's such a valuable strategy is that there are many ways, I think there are many ways to financial independence. One way, which is maybe kind of the ultimate, is to be in a position where the income off of your investments will flow in and support your living expenses. That's awesome. For young people, it's perhaps a little bit daunting. You can also set up a lifestyle that's a part-time or seasonal employment. So if this is like you said, of 6 months a year, working at a something like that, if you develop the skills, I've seen I mean, what comes to mind right now is accountants who
hmm
work during tax season and take and arrange their living expenses that they don't need to work year round. I think you're in, software developers, people who can work anywhere, writers. There are so many careers that can be done on a seasonal basis if people seek that out. That's such an important strategy for people to understand what their skills are. And then it may be that the right move is to move into a corporate 50-week a year position, or maybe the right move to take those skills and build something up that's able to be done part time.
absolutely. And part time is actually something I'm going to be investigating. I think the more and more I think about it, the more and more it makes sense to maybe transition into financial independence that way. Because I know there's probably a lot of, it's probably a big change, obviously, and there's probably a lot of weird emotions that go along with it. It's mostly exciting, but I'm sure it's going to be a little scary as well. And the idea of working part time really appeals to me. One, for tax purposes, just to, maybe rather than just work a full year as your last year before financial independence, maybe just work 2 half years, save a bunch of money on taxes, and then, slowly work your way into a new lifestyle. That's not a big change, a drastic change from what you're doing. But yeah, I completely agree. And especially in the internet age, there's so many more opportunities to do pick up part time work, or you know uh, even just work 20 hours a week doing something or whatever. Take half the year off. There's many options, which is very nice in this day and age.
Now, you were talking about your wife, and you said that she's not a scientist, but you've also said that maybe she's changing a little bit. What are you finding as you guys spend more time together? Are you finding that she's becoming attracted to your lifestyle more and more, or is she changing to that? As what are you finding as kind of the path there?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually a very big surprise. I have a post on my site called an unexpected guest post, and I was just up one night. I was writing an article, and my wife said she was going to bed, so she just kissed me goodnight, and she's like, "There's something on my computer that I want you to read." Um, And I was like, oh, okay, what is it? And she's like, just read it. So she went up to bed, and I tried to finish the article that I was writing, but curiosity quickly got the better of me because I was like, what could this possibly be? So I read, and it was just this letter to me that was like just talking about her feelings. And I think she said she got up in the middle of the night one night because she had so much on her mind, and she just started writing this. And I was sleeping, so she just typed this out on her computer, and yeah, it was like I got to watch the light bulb go off in her head as far as why I'm doing this, because like I said, we've been together for 10 plus years, and for that entire time I've been the same, like just watching my money very closely, not buying a lot of stuff, trying to save as much as possible. And she, like I said, she wasn't like that, so she didn't really understand it. And we always had separate finances, so I never, tried to force her to do anything that she didn't want to do. So we never really talked about it. But ever since I started writing on the Mad Fientist, she's my editor, so she gets to read all my articles before I post them, just to try to snag any misspellings or anything like that. But so yeah, I guess it started to sink in, and doing the podcast and interviewing other people that had pursued financial independence. She got to hear from other people besides me saying this is why I'm doing it as well. And we also got to meet up Jim Collins from jlcollinsnh.com. I interviewed him for the podcast, and he actually lives quite close, so we met up with him and his wife and had some good dinner conversations about this stuff. And so yeah, I think it just started to gradually click, like, oh, he's not just doing it because he's a cheapskate. He's doing it because he wants to let his money grow, and then use the interest off the money to actually do what he wants without working. So yeah, it started to sink in, but it wasn't until we really started planning out our perfect life that she started realizing. Because like I said before, she loves what she does. She loves working. So to her, it was like, well, why shouldn't I, buy something that I want? Because I'll make more money, and I always like my job. So making more money is not a problem for me. So why not just spend it? But when we started seeing that, look, this could actually give us, 6 months for you of not working at all, spending more time with friends and family than we do now, seeing more places than we see now, while still allowing you to be an optometrist, then it really sunk in. And yeah, now she's just totally behind the idea. Her spending has completely changed. She wasn't like going crazy before, but she's definitely more conscious of what she's spending her money on and when. So yeah, it's been that's the one of the biggest benefits of actually starting to write about this stuff, was that, yeah, I think it really got her on board, and now we're in this together, which is great.
Yeah, and it's neat that you can share that story, because a lot of times when people talk about financial planning, and many people see frugality and saving and investing as a sacrifice, and they see it as a sacrifice of something that they want. And I thought I enjoyed that. We're going to go to your triple value of income article, because I thought that was a good way to talk about it. But I'll set you up for it. I think that many people who are frugal, and many people who are pursuing strategies like you are, don't view it as sacrifice, but they view it more as a way for them to get what they really want.
You're absolutely right. It's not a sacrifice. And actually, the more and more that I cut back, like, I started as frugal, but now with the goal so close in sight, like, I'm still dialing more and more back. And as I do, I'm getting happier and happier, and I feel freer, and less stress, less worries. And it's got to the point where I'm thinking, just rather than keep whittling down to reach the sweet spot, at this point I may be better just giving up everything, and then only picking up the things that I really miss, and that may be more efficient to get to the sweet spot that way. Because yeah, it's not hard. with such a amazing goal and the finish line so close, it just, yeah, it's so easy not to go out and spend a bunch of money on stuff that's not important to me. And you mentioned the triple value of income article. That's actually where it all started pretty much. Because yeah, my mom, I was speaking to her one day, and I don't know, something came up, and I said I wasn't going to spend any money on it or something. She's like, "Why don't you just go out and buy something to make yourself happy?" And I thought a lot about it, and I'm like, that would not make me happy. Um, and I wanted to figure out a way to explain it, and so I started thinking, and I'm like, yeah, if I spend the dollar, then it's gone, and I have this thing that, I probably am not going to be that into in a few weeks, and it's like, or if I keep the dollar, that dollar is going to actually be worth X amount when I actually spend it, depending on if I put it into a retirement account or if I put it into, a normal investment account. So yeah, I wrote the triple value of income post to show that, I forget the numbers I use, but say you make 100,000 a year, that 100,000 is actually only worth 80,000 to you because you have to pay 20,000 in tax. But if you instead funnel a lot of that into tax advantage accounts, then you're getting the full value of your dollar plus all of the interest that you would accrue while it's in those accounts. And yeah, it seemed like a really good way to explain why I don't feel like I need to spend money, because I'm just delaying my gratification for more gratification later, for those same dollars.
Yeah, and there's no right or wrong here, but I like the fact. I have a good friend of mine who's a little bit older, and it's interesting with your $100,000 example. This good friend of mine, he's older, he's quite wealthy. Most people would consider him to be quite wealthy, but he has a boating habit, and he really enjoys. I live down here in Florida. He lives in Florida as well. He really enjoys large, expensive boats. So he has a boating habit that costs him in excess of six figures a year. So it's a nice boat, and he enjoys it. So with this in excess of six figures a year, he actually continues to work part time so that he can support that boating habit. And to me, like, the reason I'm bringing this up is because just to hammer home for the 83rd time, either one of these is fine. So at this stage in your life, at 30 years old, the $100,000 for you is to get the triple value and to build it up into future, because that's more valuable. But for my friend who's in his late 60s, for him the $100,000 is far more better served, and he gets far more value out of it by spending it, allowing him to enjoy a luxurious lifestyle on the water. So, but you got to do it in an intelligent way. And at a younger age, I think most folks, it's so valuable to understand the math between what you've laid out and understand how, by working that math at 30, it puts you in a position at 40 and 50 and 60 and 70 where you're able to enjoy the utility of that for a much enhanced lifestyle.
Absolutely, and yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. And yeah, your friend with the boat, that's something I've been thinking about as well recently, that I thought it would make an interesting article. Is, I wonder, you said, so I assume he owns his own boat,
Yes,
and he still spends 100K a year.
correct. Yeah, that's not the acquisition cost. That's
Right.
that's the running cost per year.
Right. Yeah. So, like, I don't know anything about renting boats, but I imagine you could probably rent a pretty amazing boat for 100K a year. Not obviously for the entire year, but whenever you wanted to use it, and not have to deal with all the other garbage of keeping it and all of that stuff. And I imagine you could probably do it for less than 100K, but maybe, obviously he wouldn't be able to just, think, oh, I'm going to go on my boat right now and then go on it. So there's obviously trade-offs, but yeah, just a lot of people's very expensive hobbies and things like timeshares and things like that, where you're only using it a bit, or like RVs and things like that. It's like, I wonder if they've thought about renting before just going ahead and buying, and did the numbers as far as you could probably rent some pretty cool things, and then not get sick of them.
Yeah, you're gonna love my smart person's guide to spending money show, because here would be like a couple different ways that it could do it. I'm not a boating person, so I'm with you as far as I would usually rather rent stuff like that,
Hmm.
because I uh, would enjoy it. Now, it's challenging to hit the boat again. I'm down here in South Florida. We're talking about a 45-foot type of sport fishing boat. To charter one of those, you can charter it, and you can go out and you can charter it for the weekend. You can charter it. And you can do it, and you can have a lot of fun on that. But you can also flip it around, and for the right situation, somebody with a boat like that, if somebody has a business, that boat can be an extension of their business, something that they use to entertain clients, and something that they can use to entertain customers and clients. It could also be something where it's a business in and of itself. So you can buy the boat if you have the cash to buy the boat, and you can turn around and you can charter it out yourself. Well, because you're chartering it out yourself, number one is you can turn it from an expense into potentially an income, or you can use it as a how do I put this appropriately? You can use it as a business which is designed to be profitable, but allows some of your expenses to be absorbed by the business side of the tax code. Uh, at some point in the future, I'm going to do a detailed show on tax planning. But one of the most valuable things for people to do who are interested in luxuries is if you have a luxury that you enjoy, and this is something that's important to you, whether it's big boats or racing cars or something like that. One of the most beneficial things you can do is you can say, how can I take my luxury and how can I turn it into a business? So if I enjoy operating a boat, it's very possible that I may enjoy operating the boat and being out on the water just as much if I have 5 paying clients on board with me versus me just simply being out there with just myself or with 3 or 4 of my buddies. And by taking something like that and turning it from an expense over into a business, and by running it in a business-like manner, following the tax rules very carefully, keeping good records, you can take and you can legitimately turn the expense move it over onto a business return, where you have basically just like you would enjoy, instead of spending your money in a taxable world, you can take that expenditure, which would cost you 80 cents, excuse me, which would cost you 100 cents if you were doing it in a taxable world, to turn around and turn that expenditure into an 80-cent expenditure in the business world. And there's a lot that you can do with it. And if you keep good records, you can use your business assets and you can use them for both on the business side, but you can also get the personal enjoyment out of them as well.
That's a great. Yeah, I'm definitely excited to listen to your smart spending money podcast because yeah, that's an excellent strategy and that's an awesome way to have an expensive hobby.
Yeah, and the key is knowing what the rules are and knowing what you want. I personally have zero interest in ever pursuing that course of action because I don't enjoy boating that much. But for somebody who that's important to them and they want to do it, look for a way to do it intelligently and look for a way to stack these functions on top, where instead of having something be a large expense, can you make it into an income stream? So there's lots of things that can do. There's lots of ways that people can do that and do it very intelligently.
Yeah, that's exactly what we plan to do. Travel is our biggest passion. Definitely, we don't have many hobbies, but we love to go and see new places and experience new things. So, travel was probably my biggest expense of my 20s. But yeah, we're flipping that around, and we're going to use it to come out further ahead than if we didn't travel. Because, like I said, we're gonna go and spend long, like 3 months plus at these different places that we've always wanted to go and see. But we're going to live like locals, so we're going to be able to get apartments rather than hotels, and the flight cost will be minimal. Not only because I've got quite good at travel hacking, but just because it's one flight over 3 to 6 months rather than most people take one flight over 1 or 2 weeks for their vacations, and that obviously jacks up the price of the trip. And plus, there's just tons of cheap but very interesting places to live in the world that we're going to end up spending less money day to day living there than we would living in the States or in Scotland. So yeah, we're trying to turn our biggest passion not into a business, but use it in a way that it will actually help us financially as well.
Absolutely. So let me go to your article there on travel hacking because this was a great article. The trip that you recently did is you recently took a trip and you flew from Boston to Ireland and used some strategies. And I think the strategies would be a little too detailed for the air, in the article you flew from Boston to Dublin and then from Dublin to Glasgow, and you stayed a couple nights in a five-star London hotel, and your total out-of-pocket cost was how much?
Less than 150 each for all of that.
And that would have been purchased at retail would have been about $2,000 each, something like that.
Let's see. That would have been. It would have been about. Oh, it would have been over a grand each, definitely. A Boston to Dublin flight, usually, if you're lucky, you can get it maybe for 700, 800. At the time when I booked it, I record everything I do just to see how much money I'm actually saving. So at the time, I think two of those tickets would have cost 1692.38. So we ended up saving 1450 by using miles. So yeah, that would have been over 1600 just for the flights from Boston to Dublin because it was summertime. It's America to Europe. That's not a cheap cheap trip. And then from Dublin we went to Glasgow because that's where my wife's family is. But my sister was studying abroad in London at the time, so we wanted to stop in London. So yeah, a one-way ticket from Dublin to London, then London to Glasgow. That would have been over $200 each, or close to $200 each, I think. And then yeah, 2 nights in a five-star hotel right in Leicester Square. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. The actual cost of the room was $974 for 2 nights, but we didn't pay anything. We used miles. I'm trying to see here. Oh yeah, I wrote on the post that we saved $240 because there's no way we would have spent $974 to stay in a five-star hotel had we been paying. But yeah, the actual cost of that room for 2 nights on that weekend that we were there was $974. So the only thing we did pay was tax on the flights, and absolutely nothing on the hotel. So yeah, it was less than 150 each, and it was an amazing trip. And it was cheap once we got there, obviously, because we were just staying with my wife's family, and yeah, it was amazing. So yeah, travel hacking is one of those hobbies that you mentioned earlier that saves you money, but it can be a hobby. It's actually a lot of fun, and there's lots to it, and could keep you occupied for a while. And there's nothing better than waking up in a five-star hotel and seeing all the people around you and thinking that they spent a fortune and you didn't spend a penny. So.
Yeah, this article, I mean, the travel hacking using the credit cards and the miles and the points is something that it's a topic that fascinates me. I am not actively doing it, but it fascinates me. I'll give you a book that I just finished that you may, I don't know if you read or not, but the author of that book goes through some of his deals and how he did them. The book is called Get More, Spend Less, and the author, I think his name is Brad Wilson. He writes at bradsdeals.com. Have you heard of that book?
No, I've not. It sounds interesting though.
Check it out. I think you would enjoy it. I think you would enjoy it because he goes through some of his deals, and his deals are like yours, incredible. And he goes through some of his. He's pretty hardcore about it, very extreme, and you'll love his story. And that's also, I'll do a review on that book at some point here. But
Nice.
also, it's the recommendation for anybody listening that wants to read a good book, that you on your site you give some good resources to the Flyer Talk forums and to some blogs that kind of teach about this. But it's definitely a good way to exploit the system a little bit right now.
Oh, it's great, and yeah, it's going to be very important to us because, like I said, once we get to these really cool places, it's going to be cheaper living there, but getting there could be expensive. But using these travel hacking techniques, and currently I'm just building up my balances big time in preparation for all the travel that I plan to do in the next whatever decade or so. But yeah, using those to make the travel between these interesting places very cheap is just gonna make the benefit of travel even greater for us financially. So, but yeah, there's lots of great resources out there, and it is very addictive. And it's very important to know how to use your miles just as much as it's important to know how to get the miles that you need. I think using them is even more important because even though I flew from Boston to Dublin for such a little bit of money and not a lot of miles, the way I did it is very unknown. The way I used the miles and the way that I did. So, I spent less than half the amount of miles that normal people do when they try to book a America to Europe flight, and I paid probably a third or a fourth of the taxes that some people have to pay. And so, yeah, it's just following some good blogs and checking out Flyer Talk and reading about it, and you can really just extract some incredible amounts of value out of these things. So,
And I also want to point out how these functions stack, like how this is a part of the strategy. Many people discount flying on points because of blackout dates, because of when they can fly. Many people discount travel. But if one is financially independent and one has flexibility over their schedule, then number one, you can fly either at the cheapest time. So you can take those Wednesday flights or the Saturday afternoon flights that are just simply inexpensive. You can fly at the seasons when a lot of people can't fly. So you can avoid the summer season when everyone's out of school, but you can go on the shoulder season between the high season and the low season, and you can get really, really great values. Or you can pursue some of you can take the award tickets on the dates that they're available. And so you can be flexible on that, and you can afford to slow down. So like you said, one of the major expenses of traveling, when most people think about traveling, they think about, well, I've got this 2-week vacation that I have to take. And you call it slow travel, but if you have this 2-week vacation, and let's say you're going to take a 2-week vacation to Europe, well, let's say you pay retail and you got $1,000 each for a plane ticket. And then because you're there for 2 weeks, you have to do this, you have to pack everything in every single day. You've got to have rental cars while you're there. You've got to stay in hotels while you're there. You can't take a 1-month apartment rental instead of staying in a hotel. You can't slow down enough to use public transportation instead of having your own car. Because of the time pressure of being fixed on this, work 50 weeks a year schedule, you wind up spending, I don't know, $7,000-8,000 on a 2-week vacation to Europe. Where if you are financially independent and you can slow down, you can take that exact same amount of money and stretch it out over a couple of months because of your flexibility. So the functions stack on top of each other.
Oh, absolutely, and you're not cooking for yourself. You're not doing anything. You're just spending money just as fast as you can, pretty much, just to have a good time, and you will have a good time. But as you said, like $7 or $8 grand, that could easily sustain somebody for an amazing year in Central America or Southeast Asia or South America. That could be a whole year of learning Spanish and learning how to cook and going to the local markets and things that make travel really special, that just don't cost a lot of money to do. And yeah, you could take. I know I could live for a year on some of the budgets people have on their 1 week, 2 week vacations here in the States.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is unique. I think this is a U.S. American concept that in our culture is not so well understood. When I was in college, I lived in Costa Rica, and I did a research project with the business school that I was studying at. I did a research project for a Costa Rican ecotourism company, and we prepared a report on American tourists, British tourists, and German tourists. And it's very clear when you look at it that as Americans, we would go to Costa Rica for a 1-week vacation, and we would want everything carefully programmed in that 1 week. So every single day, from morning to night, there are activities, and we don't have a lot of time, so we're willing to spend a significant amount of money on those trips. So, and we would want everything planned out in advance of the trip. So when we go up, when we show up, we know what our itinerary is. Every moment of every day is scheduled, and we've got it all kind of planned out. The British tourists would come, they would want their itinerary planned out, but they would usually come for about a month instead of a week. So they would stretch the time out longer, and they wouldn't want everything planned out every day. They would want to make sure that they had some downtime to figure it out. And I'm using generalizations to make my point, but these are pretty accurate. The German tourists would show up at the airport without a single plan, without a single booking, but they would be there for 2 months. And they would get to the country, they would get to Costa Rica, then once they were there, they would figure out what they wanted to do, when they wanted to do it, and they would spend half the money that the Americans spent in a week, over a
Mm-hmm.
2 month vacation while they were there.
Oh, it's crazy.
It's a dramatic cultural difference between the cultures.
But yeah, it's the adventure and the not knowing and the uncertainty that makes travel so rewarding when you look back on it. Like, yeah, my wife and I lived in China for 3 months, and obviously didn't learn too much Mandarin in that time. And but we would just hop on a local bus, try to find our way to some very remote, weird, small little village in China, and it would be, we wouldn't know exactly when the bus was coming back, if it was coming back, and yeah, it's just fun. It's the adventure. That's what makes it. If you want to, yeah, if you want to have just normal life, um, eating the same things you eat and doing the same things you do at home, then save a lot of money and just go to the next town over.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the end of the first part of the Radical Personal Finance podcast interview with me, the Mad Fientist. In part two, we dive into some really interesting strategies for achieving financial independence as quickly as possible. So if you enjoyed part one, I really think you're going to enjoy part two as well. Since this isn't really my podcast, I don't feel right signing off with a computerized equation like I normally do. So this time I'll just say thanks for listening, and I'll see you in part two.